Next, let's please welcome Azel Mir, partner, technology industry leader at Cohen Resnick, to the stage to lead the discussion on leading APIs who are designing platforms for payment companies. Hey.
Well, you know, oh, okay.
I think we may be short Ryan. Hopefully he'll join us, but everybody gets a little bit more time to chat. Welcome for this panel. My name is Azel Mir. I'm a partner leading Cohen Resnick technology practice. For today's panels, we don't get Ryan here, but we got Marwan and Dan. The topic is near and dear to the heart, I think, of everybody in the room here today. Next generation payment, how your kids will interact with money. Before we delve into that, I just want to thank our panelists, really looking at some of the insights you have, and just encourage everybody to take advantage of not just this educational opportunity, but really connect with each other. This organization, Benzinga, has done a tremendous job just building a nice ecosystem around fintech, and I'm glad everybody's here. So instead of doing injustice to the individuals here, I'll let you guys introduce yourself, maybe the companies, obviously, and maybe how you got started. Dan?
Sure. Dan Scheinfeld, VP Merchant Services and Integration Management at Checkalt. Originally, actually started off in capital markets on the business side, working for the New York Mercantile Exchange way back. Eventually got involved with a company that decided back in early 2000 to expand into financial services. Early days of API adoption, we actually launched 3 products in the prepaid space, a dual ATM money transfer card, a personalized reloadable prepaid card, as well as gift cards. And original systems, actually, we had a lot of challenges using APIs. The partner that we worked with actually did not expect to have to deal with retail environments where the response time was very important because you've got people on a queue on a line waiting to check out. So in those early days, we actually helped our partners speed up those processes using SOAP APIs way back in the early 2000s. More recently at Checkalt, I'm actually involved with integration management on payment products, and we process payments across organizations, financial institutions, as well as consumer portals. And we're using APIs today to basically wrap our legacy systems that were closed, basically payment processing at the wholesale, hotel level. We're wrapping those in APIs now to expose those to third-party partners in bilateral APIs.
Hey guys, I'm Marwan Forsley. I run a company called Veeam. We make it really simple for businesses to pay and get paid around the world. It's like Venmo for businesses globally. We have 150,000 businesses. We're in 110 countries, 50 currencies. And we really got started to make it really simple for businesses to move money. The idea, when you buy coffee in the morning, you don't think of how you pay, you just do it. When you do international payments, in particular business payments, it goes from really simple to really complex. And so we wanted to essentially rip that whole thing up and provide a very different experience to the user. That's why we created Veeam. And it's designed to optimize the routing of payments on multiple rails. We call it multi-rail, which is a concept of essentially managing money as it flows from one country to another and optimizing that experience for the user. So that's how we got started.
Fantastic. So I guess for both of you, it's innovative technology in multi-rail, of course. Really, when I think about the challenge, not just for fintech companies, accounting, and probably everybody in the room, the concept of customer acquisition and what it takes when somebody's handling money. The title of the event, of this panel, is Next Generation, focusing on kids, but I'm going to say we are all kids when it comes down to this. What's your perspective on accelerating that trusted relationship build, and what kind of actions does your company take in order to do that, to accelerate?
Yeah, when you're moving money, it's all about trust. It's step one because the businesses or the customers, they have to trust us for moving their money. And to enable that, there's a sequence of events that need to happen. You gotta be certified and regulated and managed by all the various bodies that have oversight, and you gotta communicate that to the customer so that they understand that there's oversight in moving their money. Number two, we go out of our way communicating the status of payments to both the sender and the receiver. And part of earning the customer's trust is to be over communicating on what's going on with the system and updating each side. And we learned that the more you communicate, the more transparency you have, the more likely customers are going to trust you because they see the payments moving, and that's how you earn their trust. And in payments, it's not assumed that you're going to get the customer's trust immediately. What happens in practice is a lot of customers start with us, they test the system, they like it, they start moving more money and add more relationships to the platform. So it's a process to get them to trust an alternative to the bank provider that they work with.
So similarly, we process around 65 million payments, a little bit over $3 billion annually. And the way we earn trust, and we've got 2 levels of trust in many cases, or 3 levels of trust that we have to establish. One is with the actual financial institution that we're processing their client's work for, the actual client in many cases, and then many times we're actually processing payments for consumers. So we actually have to establish that trust as well. What we're trying to do in that space is enhance our portals that we've got in different form factors today. So what used to just be a web-based portal, we're now extending that to be form factor friendly and for tablets as well as mobile devices, which now in generation digital, right, digital generation that we're all, like you say, we're all in, it's something that's much more adopted today than even, let's say, 5 or 10 years ago.
Sure.
Today, phones are ubiquitous, and people are expecting to be able to access all their financial products and payment processing all on these mobile devices today. So we understand those challenges as well, and we're working with our partners as well in that space.
So you touched on the last point about partners. I mean, the reality is we can't do everything ourselves, and we talk about the APIs, and it's really talking about identifying the right partners, and again, putting that hat of trust, and it's so difficult to get it, so easy to lose it. What kind of like the thought process you have about vetting the partners that you collaborate in terms of APIs and such?
We're big on partnerships. We actually believe that payments it's kind of like a utility. It's at the bottom of a stack. Whatever you do in life, you end up paying. And so it plugs into a lot of environments. So we're integrated into QuickBooks, Xero, NetSuite, SAP, and Magento, all through APIs. It's all through the same methodology. You give the API to the partner, and you plug into the partner's ecosystem. So we're big fans of that idea. It not only provides a simple customer experience because you're doing it from the context of the environment you're in, it also is secure, and it's a way to allow the customer to experience a new system without having to learn the new system. You just do it in the context of what you do today. So we're big on partnerships, so we'll continue to do a lot more in various integrations.
I'd say in our case, because we have a lot of compliance as well in our industries, whether it be health, or payment processing, HIPAA compliancy. So we make sure, obviously, that all our audits are passed, and we're doing everything that we can to establish systems and methodologies of communications that are compliant with current regs. So I think that's a big part of the underlying structure for establishing that security. And then from that security, you build the trust from there. So once you have established the fact that the baseline systems are all secure and compliant, that initially that gives you that edge to work with the client and say, now that we've established that level of trust, let's show you, as you say about APIs, we can now show you how we can easily interact with each other in a secure way.
Understood. So I guess, again, leading up to building trust and that concept becomes a buzzword is transparency. And really, when you talk about the consumer and payment processing, every interaction, transparency. I know your system has some unique ability to share information, communicate. Maybe you want to share some of your thoughts on what does it mean to your interface and your customer base?
Yeah, so think of when you move money around the world. Let's say you do a bank wire from New York to China. When you do the bank wire, you pay the fees and you fill the form and you send the money, and you really have no idea what happened to it until the receiver tells you, hey, I received your money. And so it goes into the cloud, and you don't hear about it until you have communication from the receiver. So the way we do it is kind of like the other way around. So when you log in, you'll see money moving along the way. So you, as the sender and the receiver, both see the money moving, and we timestamp it, and we communicate on each end. It's kind of like if you order an Uber, you see the driver coming to you. So the same concept. You'll see the money.
See the
coming
funds
to
in
you.
flight.
Yeah, it's like, and it's amazing how comforting it is for, especially for the receiver, to actually watch money coming to them. It's like one of these soothing experiences. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna get paid tomorrow.
Not so good, not the same way on the way
On
out.
the way out.
Yeah, it's not, yeah. But it's simple things like that where you're communicating on both ends and you're being very deliberate in tracking the payment and transparency. And transparency, it's good for the customer, and it's also sometimes when there's something that happens along the way, we also tell both sides that, hey, there's an issue with the payment. And that whole system ends up being helpful for all parties, for the sender, for the receiver, and for us, because we earn their trust along the way.
Yes, I think a uniqueness about the space you play in is international transfers. That usually gives that uncertainty for those 3 days. That knowing what's going on there certainly gives visibility, gives some ability, transparency.
Yeah.
Your perspective, I guess, is much faster than
It is.
that.
So yeah, we're domestic based. We don't have to deal with a lot of the regs that you're having to deal with. But in our case, what we try to do is we actually have on our platforms the ability for a consumer to pay as a guest. What we believe that adds value is that allows the consumer to build trust with us, with whoever their payee that they're paying. The payer now has a established trust. After that guest experience is successful, now we allow the consumer then to go and say, okay, I want to be a registered client of yours or a registered consumer. That builds another level of trust where now we're actually storing payment information, PCI compliant, of course. But now instead of just having to, upfront give all that payment information without really knowing whether or not the payment product, the payment method is going to be successful and it's going to be secure, we allow that guest experience for us to establish that level of trust.
Maybe to build on that, the regulatory environment obviously is changing, ever changing in our space. You obviously had GDPR coming through in Europe and the California Consumer Protection Act kicking in January 1st is going to be a big deal. So when you talk about privacy and thinking about, transparent about what access I'm giving, who's accessing my data, where is it stored, like you mentioned, maybe you want to give some thoughts about how you're staying in the forefront of it and retaining the trust you've already gained.
So in our case, we work with financial institutions predominantly, and in those cases, we're actually working with those financial institutions to establish what those processes are going to be in the future, and ensuring that whatever we do and whatever we agree with those financial institutions is compliant with the regs. So we really have that good partnership with our financial institutions that actually help us look forward to what it is that is going to be required down the road as well.
So you have, I guess you want to talk about some of the collaboration as the partners that you tie into?
Absolutely. So we're actually now embarking on a project to begin migrating some of our technology to the cloud. And in doing so, we are working with the nationwide footprint financial institutions that we have as clients to help us navigate those waters, if you will. So what I would say is that in our space, these larger financial institutions have been somewhat hesitant to adopt cloud. What's happened in the last 3 years or so, from our perspective, is that the acceptance is now there. Financial institutions of all sizes accept the fact that the direction is going to be cloud-based systems. In doing so, we've now enabled ourselves to work with them by having that acceptance, to work with them to establish some of those methodologies of how we're going to securely store data and transmit data in transactional basis on the cloud.
Well, we're regulated in a number of countries. We service 110 countries. So we're regulated in a bunch of them. And in the US, for example, you have to get regulated in every state. And in order to do that, part of actually getting the licenses, you have to make sure that you have all the necessary security and privacy protection and all the regulations around it. And it goes through audits along the way to make sure that you're not only saying this is what I'm doing, they actually audit and make sure that's what you end up doing. And so there's all kinds of security processes that we have to put in place to encrypt data and make sure that data is safe, but also internal controls within the company who can see what information is really important and part of the processes for getting these licenses. And we go out of the way to make sure that none of that data makes it to other parties without permission from the customer, because all it takes is one mistake and then you lose all the trust that you earn with the customer.
Yeah. So to that point, obviously security is forefront. Money is just a kind of the nature of the beast. And understand, obviously, investing in that perspective. Let's draw a worst case scenario. I deal with my clients all the time. I said, what's the biggest thing that worries you? Something is going to happen. Somebody at some point is going to be able to break security and maybe access data they haven't. Your thoughts or kind of the process you have about what I call business continuity plans. What happens when there is a snap and something gets publicized in a bad way? Any thoughts you have on that?
It's partly being proactive on the issue that comes and making sure that there's communication along the way to all the stakeholders that are involved. One of the things that happens in this business is whenever there's an attack or there's a security issue, the worst thing to do is to go silent, actually, not tell anybody. Yeah. And it's the opposite that matters, actually communicating on the status of things, where things are at, what's going to happen to fix it. These are all proactive measures to make sure that you're upfront and proactive about it.
Absolutely.
If it happens. But you want to make sure that you have all the necessary procedures so that it doesn't happen.
Yep.
Yeah, likewise for us. So we've got our compliance department that is always planning for those potential disasters, if you will. I'll go back to the cloud. And we had that recent incident a few months back where there was a breach on the cloud. But as it turned out, if you look at the details of what occurred there, it was actually a lack of settings that was in place, that was supported by the cloud provider, that were not initiated in the right way. So I think that points out two things. It points out the need for reviewing on a constant basis what the procedures are and enforcing those procedures. I think it also requires well-rounded education about how those procedures and the processes for setting those environments correctly so that you don't fall into a situation where you're unaware of what you should have done, and instead you are aware of what you do need to do and you're checking that it's actually being done and enforced.
So you're raising a great point, I think. The advice often with conversation with clients, I get asked, but we dealt with it last year, or that's the way we've done it for a while. And the advice I always give is just because you gave me that answer, we should relook at it. That means we haven't looked at it enough.
Right, you fall into a sense of complacency, thinking that you've got it covered.
Yeah. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. And again, payment processing has been around for a while. Obviously, some of your history going back decades in the early stages of APIs connections. I'm wondering kind of your take on maybe the most innovative type of technology where you see this stuff is going. So going to the cloud is obviously something that happened. It was brewing for a while. It's just, financial institution takes time to adopt. It's just the nature of the beast. But your thoughts about any kind of innovative technology, something that's really exciting in the space beyond going to the cloud?
So in our case, in addition to cloud-based, again, I think Checkvault is uniquely positioned in the sense that we've got a lot of technology. It just happens to be legacy technology. And because it was legacy technology and the payment processing environment that we had was more closed, we have this unique opportunity to take leverage that technology and expose it to our clients and third-party vendors by wrapping that technology in secure API layers. And what that's enabling us to do is to actually extend the life of those legacy platforms. And instead of having to rewrite them from scratch, we're now able to wrap this technology in an innovative API methodologies of today to exposing that same technology and reusability of that technology with third-party vendors and our clients.
Yeah, we have a concept called multi-rail, which is the idea of essentially moving money on different technologies. So we have our own bank accounts. We use the blockchain quite a bit. We use third-party providers. We use SWIFT, so we go in and out between them. And one of the emerging trends right now, there's a lot of activity all around the blockchain, multiple flavors of it, from the use of Bitcoin to transfer money to all the alternatives, to the emergence of Libra with Facebook and other technologies. That market is going to be active for a while, and we think that there's going to be a large number of new rails actually coming up. It's going to be a situation where, because we're servicing a big world and there's too many industries and too many use cases, there's going to be different rails for different use cases. And our view is that what actually is needed in the market is technologies that go in and out between different methods and match-make the method to the context of the user, because it's very difficult to find one rail that cuts all and services all these different markets. And that's a trend that's going to continue for a while.
So you touch about blockchain, obviously, is a big deal, but I always focus on the supporting casts, quantum computing, 5G technology to be able to really, the infrastructure has come a long way to open doors for new applications.
Sure.
Your thoughts on how that kind of stuff affects you? Is it speed it's all about, or is there something else in the secret sauce?
Well, it's whenever you're servicing the customer, there's multiple components to that story. And one of the components is speed of delivery. And any technology, whether it's domestic or international, that enhances speed is something that we would definitely integrate into the system to make it easier for customers to use the service. I mean, it's kind of crazy that we're in 2019, that it takes still 3 days to send money to
send your own money.
your own money to Brazil, for example, or China or Germany. I had one customer tell me once that they sent money on BankWire to Mexico, actually. And it took 5 days for the money to show up in Mexico. And he was telling me, it's just simpler to just take the money, put it on a plane, and just drop it off. And so, this is 2019, right? So we should, I don't know why all this is not real time, but it takes time for all these systems to migrate and move to the next generations. And that's, a process. It doesn't happen overnight. All these systems take time to move them to their next generation, to the next phases. And that's going to be an active market for a while.
Dan, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think on that point, so you combine the need for speed with the additional technology that enables the speed, but then you've got to think of security on top of that, and compliance. And I think that those two aspects, and risk, right? Every partner in those transfers assumes some level of risk. So I think when you add those all together, you can still come back to why it does take that additional time. And it's not going to be until those adoptions occur, the risk is mitigated or identified, and technology then is adopted within those parameters, that you're going to see that speed of the transactions enhanced. It's actually interesting. So I mentioned earlier about the two-card money transfer. Today, if there are still companies doing that, that is actually then the quickest way to actually get the money there, right? You can load the funds here, and literally within seconds, the funds are available for withdrawal at an ATM machine internationally. So.
Yeah, and I think we're familiar with a company that does that kind of stuff. So we don't have a lot of time left. If you mind, I'll open it for maybe a question from the audience.
Please.
I can't see. I guess not. So any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I think just on the concept of new technology and real time, one of the things that you'll see is there's a lot of solutions where domestic payments, you can go ahead faster in that setting compared to international. International gets more complicated, especially with the size of the transfer. So if you're doing, to follow up on your comment about card-to-card transactions, if you're doing like $200 payments and you're moving it from here to Germany, that you'll find technology that will start moving that and move it faster.
Sure.
But I guess a lot more complicated if you're moving to million,
Of course.
or 200,000.
Of course.
And so a lot of this varies on the amounts and the specific country pairs that you're working with. And there where it gets really complicated is not necessarily just the payment technology, but in order to move money, you got to make sure that there's risk management in place and KYC and KYB. And that's where you start losing some of the time because there's technologies needed to verify the customer before you actually move the money. So this whole concept of real-time payments is a really big topic, and it's like an onion. It's like part of it is technology of payments, part of it has nothing to do with payments. It's all KYC, KYB, and risk management.
Agreed. I think you see that as well. Like we talked about Libra a few minutes ago, and so a lot of that solves perhaps identifying for consumers in this case a partner that they identify and they use on a daily basis. But at the end of the day, there's still that control level. And it's interesting, you've got the diametrically opposed. You've got the groups of people that actually do not want control whatsoever. And then you've got the mass adoption group, right, which actually look for some control, because without control at all, then you get those fluctuations in pricing. And it's not really then becomes a type of payment method that you can really rely on.
So at this point, we're out of time. So thank you both for the insight, for sharing some of that knowledge. Certainly I think the space itself is still in the midst of a lot of disruption still going on, although it's a traditional type of business. I think new technology, the regulatory environment presents unbelievable opportunities in the space. So again, thank you very much. Thank you, Benzinga, for hosting this, and I look forward to connecting with you individuals later on.